Locked On Red Wings, Jakub Vrana returns from the player assistance program. And then three other Red Wings who we thought we wouldn't see for quite some time did go to practice.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. I'm your host, Brian Fisher. Sorry for the impromptu podcast. It was kind of a last-minute decision. Sunday is going to be jam-packed with information. Also, sorry for the misfire on the stream that I set up the schedule. Had to figure things out on my end, but here we are. I'm solo because Scotty's still at work. And forgive me if it's a little less a little less scheduled and planned out as my previous episodes, as this is kind of off the cuff. Scotty and I, as you guys know, we record a day in advance for our episodes. Yesterday was an off day, so we recorded about 5 o'clock yesterday, and we did a whole entire episode about how the next 2 weeks, at the minimum, could be tough for Red Wings fans because of the fact that guys were injured. I said that if Hronek and Larkin go on the IR, it would be $30 million of the $80 million cap hit that the Red Wings currently have would be on the IR or in player assistance. Well, today, you can throw that entire Thursday, well, I guess today's episode, throw the entire Friday episode out the window as Jakub Vrana, the news came out that he is out of player assistance. And that, that in and of itself is fantastic news, as it means that he is in a place that he feels comfortable not being constantly surrounded with people who are going to help him. And he's still going to get help. As it said in the statement, he will continue his treatment at home, and he's going to still be surrounded by people who are going to support him and help him. And that's the most important thing. Before we get into even the implications that this could be for the Red Wings and on the ice, the fact that Jakub Vrana is returning means he's taken a step in the right direction in whatever it is he's dealing with. And we still don't know, and it is wrong for us to assume or make speculation. But just to see him back on the ice, and that was the big thing is, as you guys know, I work for WWJ News Radio. Formerly, I worked at 97.1. They're in the same building. I went down the hall to talk to Kenny Cott, who I went to college with, is a really good buddy of mine. He's one of the other big hockey minds in the station. And I was like, dude, Jakub Vrana has returned. And we were just like so beside ourselves. And I was like, wait, hold on though. He's returned off player assistance and he's active, but it could still take time for him to get back to the ice. So I want to preface it with this, guys, that he's at practice. He's wearing a non-contact jersey, and that's awesome. That's absolutely stellar. But it could still take a little bit of time because he hasn't skated in 2 months. He hasn't practiced the team in 2 months, and he could still be working his way back to it. But the fact that he's on the ice practicing with the team means he's on his way back. And it's not just him. It's Dylan Larkin was out there, albeit in a non-contact jersey. I take that as a twofold thing. That means good news. Dylan Larkin is healthy enough to play, or healthy enough to practice, rather. Bad news, him wearing a non-contact jersey indicates that he's not completely 100%, and we may not see him in the next game or the game after that. It's going to be a game-by-game basis. I had heard that they're looking to see and talk to another specialist, but him being on the ice in a non-contact jersey means that it may not be as severe as we maybe were beginning to fear it was. And then you also had Filip Hronek and Olli Maatta out there. And Olli Maatta had pneumonia, is what we've come to find out. And so his lungs are shot. He's going to be a warm-ups decision for the Detroit Red Wings in the game tomorrow against the Ottawa Senators, because it's going to depend on how much stamina he feels he has. But with Olli Maatta and Filip Hronek back out there, neither of those guys, mind you, in a non-contact jersey, which is fantastic to see with Filip Hronek. I feel like if you're not seeing Filip Hronek in a non-contact jersey, it's a pretty good indication that he is going to play tomorrow. And even so, Derek Lalonde said in the post-practice media availability that all those guys are to be determined. But Filip Hronek, less so than the rest of those guys. So right then and there, we talked yesterday about all these guys that could be hurt. But these 4 guys being out there and practicing, that's such a huge morale impact. And it might not be until, we talked about keeping your head above water until the new year. That might not be the case in this instance now. If you can get Filip Hronek and Olli Maatta back tomorrow, being the 2 guys that were not in non-contact jerseys, your best defensive pairing, can't believe I'm saying that. I would not have thought I was saying that at the beginning of the season, but your best defensive pairing comes back. So immediately you get a lot better at goal prevention, and you get a lot deeper at defense because they've already sent Steven Kampfer down in a adjacent move to those 2 guys being in non-contact jerseys. Filip Hronek, I would presume, being the guy who's for sure playing tomorrow based on the fact that Steven Kampfer got sent down, because if neither of those guys play, you only have 5D. So I would almost assume that Filip Hronek is playing. If Olli Maatta can play, you got your best defensive pairing back. And it's going to probably take a few games for Jakub Vrana and Dylan Larkin at the minimum to be back to game speed. But that is still a great, seeing that today, it was just a plethora of raw, happy emotions, which, I mean, in this 4-game losing streak stretch, we haven't felt as Red Wings fans. And I was fully prepared when it comes to Jakub Vrana that he would have been out for, until the end of the season. You can never tell with these sorts of things. Carey Price, Bobby Ryan, for everybody on these types of things, it's different. So hopefully he is back now and he is healthy. And it's just great to see. And the depth is going to be so much deeper when those 2 guys can return. Dylan Larkin coming back would immediately mean that Michael Rasmussen doesn't have to be your 1C anymore. And he's, the biggest player on your team. He's the biggest playmaker. He's the biggest goal scorer. Whether or not you agree with that, it's just a fact. He is the driving force of that offense on 1C. And getting him back would help Dominic Kubalik, Lucas Raymond, David Perron, whatever guy is on his wing at that moment. He is going to be a huge help. And then if Jakub Vrana gets back, they asked him during the press conference, what do you expect from Jakub Vrana when he returns? Derek Lalonde responded, goals. And he only has 2 games played in the season, but he scored a goal. He is a guy who can score 40 goals a season if he can stay healthy. And that's not something as Red Wings fans we have witnessed yet, but I fully believe he still has that in him. So I just wanted to come on here, and it's not going to be a full 30 minutes, guys. I want to warn you of that now. This is just bonus content. I want to get it off my chest. I'm so pumped. But seeing Jakub Vrana back, it was almost like realizing that, okay, well, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm so happy that Jakub Vrana is back. I'm so happy that Filip Hronek is probably back. Olli Maatta is right around the corner. Dylan Larkin might take a few more games, but they're starting to get healthier. They're starting to get healthier. And yes, I see all your guys on the comments. Hi, Jesse. And, I'll respond to some of your comments too as they come in. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them off. But, all of a sudden, it's looking like games like the Ottawa Senators, who are hot, and they're a much better team than the standings would suggest. It's just an opportunity for the Red Wings to not just keep their head above water, like we were saying, but continue to win hockey games like they were doing before all these injuries mounted. You have Elmer Soderblom back in the NHL. I don't know if when all these guys get healthy, if that stays, but I think for the time being, he's definitely staying, especially with that game he just played. Does this mean that they're not part of the Bedard sweepstakes? I got bad news. I don't think even with how bad they might have been with all these injuries, they would have been bad enough to outcompete some of these other teams in the Bedard sweepstakes. Like Arizona's built to lose. Montreal, albeit actually playing pretty well with Suzuki as their captain, is for the most part built to lose. There are a lot of teams out there who are going to outcompete you for the bottom of the standings. And I know it's a lottery, but when have the Red Wings ever had the luck? It would have been nice getting Connor Bedard, but the team was just, unfortunately, even without all the acquisitions, I think probably been too good to have gotten Connor Bedard. You looked at it last year, the Red Wings drafted, 8th overall? And that was with that dismal roster last season. So I don't think that they ever would have really been in the Bedard sweepstakes, not with Lucas Raymond, not with Moritz Seider, especially as those guys still haven't missed a game. Those guys, they didn't miss a single game last year, and they haven't missed a game yet this year. But Jakub Vrana coming back can be a genuine difference maker, man. This is a guy who I really think can be the driving force of your offense. Much like, think of Dominic Kubalik, but not just the goal scoring. Like Dominic Kubalik, but can carry the puck into the zone, set up plays, make plays, the guy is just a pure goal scorer. And so, like I said, it could take longer for him to return, but I don't expect it to be that much longer. I would expect him to be back at the latest right after New Year. Let's say at the worst case scenario, it takes him that long. But people were saying he looked good out there, and he said he tried his best to stay in shape while he was in the player assistance program. And I just really hope that when it comes to his recovery, it continues to go in the right direction. When it comes to the Reeves thing, I see that comment there. Want to fly to Minnesota and fight Reeves. I don't know about that, Dan. Reeves is a tank. And, that hit on Hronek, say what you will. I didn't like it. I thought it was dirty. I really did. But Filip Hronek, for what it's worth, there is, I'm not going to change my stance. I think it was a dirty hit, and I thought it was suspendable worthy. But no one standing up to Reeves was... It was damning. It really was damning, I think. It showed that the team didn't have that guy who could respond. And Sherratt tried, and he lost his footing, and it was kind of embarrassing. But he tried, and I respect that. But the team needs somebody. What's up, Joel? But I got to get to an ad break, as even on bonus episodes, got to plug those sponsors. But when we come back, obviously, we'll continue this conversation, and I'll go until I run out of things to talk about. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. I don't have a way of implementing things, so you're just going to sit here and watch me read this. Do you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell you when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friend can tell. Your coworkers can tell. Even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, driving high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA. We're back, Locked On Red Wings podcast. I'll say segment 2, although I don't know how many segments I'll go, as I'm just pumped, and this is very much off the cuff. Big news dumps Friday for the Detroit Red Wings, and with a game on Saturday and then a game preview for Monday, the Sunday episode, we wouldn't have enough time to really give this the love and care it deserves. Let me look at your guys' comments, see what to respond to here. Jesse, you're spamming me here. Let me get through some of these of yours. Why didn't Ernie fight him? Has a lot of hits. Drive sober. Drive sober, get pulled over. Don't get high and you won't die. You're full of these today. Yeah, man. When it comes to the Ryan Reeves thing, it definitely was a huge bummer to see no one go out there and fight him. Ernie has 90 hits on the season. We talked about that in today's episode. The team just doesn't have somebody who can match Reeves' intensity. And unfortunately, that is sort of a dying breed in the NHL in general. There's not a lot of players left in the NHL that have what Reeves has, for better and for worse. And I will say that the NHL is trying to get rid of Reeves' style of play because they think it's just going to, with the concussions and CTE, it's a rising concern. And I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think that I'm a huge proponent of player safety, which is why I don't understand why players don't wear more padding on their wrists so they don't break their wrists. I'm even in the minority who thinks that eventually you should probably adopt the cage in the NHL or the half cage, half bubble, but I know I'm in the extreme minority on that. But I'm tired of seeing players get their jaws broken. But that is, I know I'm on the minority on that, so I won't speak on that. So Reeves is a dying breed. There's not many guys who can do that anymore. And that was a moment where you really felt that you wanted it. But you didn't have it. Do we see the Redwood line on Saturday? Ace, I feel as if the Detroit Red Wings probably depth-wise aren't at a moment yet where you can reunite that line. I think Michael Rasmussen might still be needed at the two center line, and there are other players you play at the second line other than, Sundqvist and Elmer Soderblom. So probably not yet, but once you get Dylan Larkin, then you can have that conversation. Once you have Dylan Larkin back, you can have that conversation. Maybe move Kopp back up if you think he can perform there. But not until Larkin comes back. There's just not enough. I agree. Smith's not that guy. Smith has no problem fighting, but he's just, I don't think that he's got that NHL. How do I feel about the reporters' questions for Vrana? Yeah, so that's interesting, Aldini, that I'm not really sure how I feel about it, because on one hand, the reporters asking the questions, it's a sensitive topic, and we've gotten to a place now in just empathy, I feel like, as a country, where we know better than to ask super pointed questions at very sensitive topics. But at the same time, journalists have a job to do to try and discern as much information as possible. I think there's ways of going about the questions where it's like, is there anything you could tell us about the situation? Obviously you don't have to if you're not comfortable. And he didn't. And I think the reporters did a pretty good job of respecting the line where Vrana didn't want to say anything, and so they didn't ask. And again, it's by no means our business. So I think that when it comes to that kind of thing, I feel there are a few questions I thought were a little invasive, but overall, you kind of also have a job to do as a reporter. I see it from both sides. I work at a news station, so I understand the reporters' viewpoints, but some of them I thought were a little insensitive for sure. Just wanted to say that I love your podcast. Thank you so much for making them. Hey, from the Czech Republic, love you too, local co. I appreciate the message. Let's see, Jesse, happy Vrana is better, but people thought he was done as a wing and that nobody would want him back. That is so far from the truth. I did see a few of those tweets as well, Jesse, that the Red Wings that people didn't want the Red Wings to bring him back and that the Red Wings were done with him. I thought that couldn't have been further from the truth. In fact, I don't think the Red Wings would have signed him to the extension if they didn't think he could be part of the future. And we've gotten to a place as well where we stop blaming the person. Well, and again, that's a speculative remark, so I'm not going to make it. We don't know what was going on. But regardless, with Vrana, I think that the Red Wings organization desperately wanted him back on the ice because they know what they have in him, and they have money invested in him as well. So they're, I'm sure, equally excited to have him back out there. And everything that I can see, I don't know if you guys listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast. If you're not, you should be, because Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman are fantastic. They're beat writers who are in the know and have really good connections. They talked to Jakub Vrana before the season, and he comes off as a very down-to-earth, personable guy. So I don't think there's anyone in the locker room who would write off Jakub Vrana because of what happened. So I'm spot on. I think that anyone who said that the Red Wings wouldn't want him back are totally wrong. Thanks, Scordian. I have like 3 Red Wings hats, and this is what 3 Red Wings hats. I have this one, the Hockey Fights Cancer one, the black. I have the brown Carhartt. This is the black Carhartt one, and then I have a Locked On hat and a couple other NHL. I have a Nashville Predators hat that was Carhartt. I got it 50% off when I went and visited Nashville as a souvenir. Scotty yelled at me once for wearing it, so I don't wear it anymore. I'm not a Predators fan. It was just a cool souvenir. Sorry, guys. Let's see here. What else you guys saying? Vrana hopefully comes back and doesn't miss a step. I don't think he will. I really don't. I think Vrana, his skills are his own. And I think once getting back up to game speed, he'll be fine. Do you think Bert gets traded to another team during the deadline, or does he sign, and is he needed? Larkin, Bert, and Fabs are bros like Kucherov, Hedman, and Stammer. Yeah, see, I agree. When this team was like garbage, like really, really bad the last few years, that those 3 players really seem to have a relationship that had formed. But unfortunately, hockey is a business, and you're staring down the barrel of giving both Larkin and Bertuzzi extensions, and with, I think, like $8 million in cap space left, although you have a lot of contracts that are going to come up free here at the end of the season. It's going to be tough to give both those guys extensions, and then in 2 years give both Seider and Raymond extensions, assuming that they play up to par to get long-term extensions. So I wonder if Bert does get dealt. I really do. Can I explain what the real problem with Vrana was? I have no idea, and it's not my business to know. It's not for me to know. It's not for me to speculate. All we know is he went into player assistance program, and that's all we know. So, but when it comes to Bertuzzi and him getting traded, I think you're coming up on the possibility that it might happen, which would suck because I love him, but it just feels like with the cap space they're going to have and who they're going to have to sign to an extension, it might be the right time. But also understand that you might not get what you want back for him because his value is going to be less so than it was last year, especially because he's on an expiring deal and has been hurt twice this season. What is the likelihood of a conditioning assignment for Vrana in Grand Rapids? How many goals would he score on an AHL goaltender? Hat tricks every single game. Absolutely. No, just kidding. Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I actually think that makes a lot of sense that they send him to a conditioning stint in Grand Rapids, but they may also not. I like that idea a lot, Joel, of sending him down to Grand Rapids, because then they can send him down for 14 days. He'd stay on the AHL roster, much like we just saw with Magnus, and he'd be able to get his lungs back and get his legs back. And they do that with players coming off of injuries too. So it is a possibility. I don't think it's a high possibility because there's been a lot of guys that have come back off injuries lately, like Tyler Bertuzzi, who they just throw back out there. So I don't think it's going to happen, but it is a possibility. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad one either. You guys are hammering me here. Let me back up and make sure I don't ignore any of your questions. In my opinion, what the Wings should do to get Ned back to where he is playing like 4 games in a row, and he will eventually. Are you willing, Jesse, to sacrifice 4 games with how he's playing? I wouldn't, man. I wouldn't. With Ned, I think you're going to see a balancing act with him and Magnus. Next time they go to a backup, they're probably going to go to Ned, I would imagine, because Magnus didn't necessarily show out in that game. Give Ned another opportunity to try and earn the backup position back. I don't think you're going to give him 4 in a row. You don't reward a guy for playing poorly. Usually not how it goes. Terrence, thank you for your great Red Wings coverage. I'm not expecting a playoff team this season, nor should you. I'd just be happy to see some improvement. I'm with you there. The Wings need muscle to help protect the younger players like Tampa. Couldn't agree with you more on that one. You need a big guy with a lot of strength to come in and defend this team, which is why Steve Yzerman keeps drafting guys who are over 6 foot tall. I think Moritz Seider can be a punishing guy. I think Moritz Seider can absolutely be a punishing guy. And we saw it all last year. So I think he can be that guy who can stand up for your guys. I don't know if he's a fighter, because that tends to go away, but I like that idea a lot. Let's see. What else am I missing here? Sorry if I'm missing you guys. You guys are so active in the chat. I appreciate the heck out of that. Live Fisher, the best Fisher. Appreciate that, Landon. 313 Boot Boy. I was honestly not expecting Vrana back at all. This is awesome. So back at all is in the season or at all? Because I was expecting him back. I was starting to think that maybe just the season he'd be gone. No. 313, no, you don't want Lucic at all. Yeah, he can fight, but he can't keep up with the pace of play. You're basically playing shorthanded the entire game. You do not want Lucic. There's a reason why he's a healthy scratch. I think they play Ned tomorrow since it's well with the Sens. I mean, it is definitely a possibility. No, I'm not related to Mike Fisher. I thought about Ned too. I think if you want to win the game, you go to Ville Husso, but if you want to give Ned reps, you go to Ned. I don't necessarily think it's bad either way, just considering how the lineup's looking and shaking out. Give Ned another start, see how he performs. But I feel like if you're actually trying to win hockey games, which I believe they are, you go back to Ville Husso and you give him another 3 games, then give Ned a play. The problem is then you're like 2 weeks between Ned starts because you're balancing 3 goals. It's a weird situation they got. And honestly, guys, I don't know enough about how you balance 3 goalies to tell you how they should balance 3 goalies, because that's such a rare thing you see anymore. What happens when everyone is healthy? Who stays and who goes? Well, the tough conversation here is you look at the guys who are waiver exempt, and you're probably seeing those guys get sent down. And, first and foremost, I would think Zarnik would get sent down. I don't know if he's waiver exempt off the top of my head. I don't have it up right now. But Zarnik would definitely get sent down. Soderblom being waiver exempt would probably get sent down. I don't want to see Berggren get sent down. But, I mean, when Larkin comes back, when Bertuzzi comes back, when Fabry's back, when Vrana's back, I mean, you either waive somebody you don't want to have to waive, or you send somebody who doesn't have to go through waivers down. And I genuinely think at the beginning of the season, I would have said, oh, Adam Ernie. You send Adam Ernie down. You waive him and just risk losing him. But he's been playing so well, honestly, in those bottom 6. I don't know if you can do that. It almost feels like it's going to have to be Berggren, which stinks. I think, Luff's on the IR, so he can't be sent down regardless. But yeah, Zarnik is not waiver exempt, so he'd have to go through waivers, but I think you risk that. I think you do. Yeah, guys, I think I got it off my chest. I'm super pumped that Jakub Vrana is back practicing with the Wings. If you have any final questions here, I'll answer them really quick. Suter is healthy scratch, but he's been playing so good on the wing. Honestly, Ace, he has. Dan, I agree with you. I agree that I'm not convinced that Fabry is better option over Berger in either, but Fabry, you'd lose off waivers immediately. So it's going to be tough. Jesse, you asked another question. Let's see if I can go back. Do you think the Wings have a chance of making the playoffs this season? Not trying to make you laugh, but when do you think time will tell by when? So that is a good question. So I like that question a lot just because if this roster, even without Vrana, this roster was competing and beating playoff teams, a lot of it was because Husso was stealing games. That is, then he's the 9th best goaltender in the league at goals saved above expected. He saved 10.74 or 24 goals above expected. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's 18th in the league in save percentage. He's great. So I think that while you are relying a lot on a goaltender to stay playing really well to get you there, if this roster's healthy, they have a shot at making the wild card. I still think it's like not a high percentage, but they're in that mix absolutely. So that all depends if they can get healthy and stay healthy. But I still do think that they probably missed the playoffs regardless. I said it. I say it all the time. My season prediction was 85 points, which is still over 10 points better than last season, which is a phenomenal improvement. Ace, I wouldn't be so sure. Fabry had he tore the same ACL on his knee twice, had surgery, came back, and had a career year with the Red Wings to earn a 3-year extension, then tore the ACL on his other leg. ACL injuries aren't career ending like they are anymore. A lot of times the player comes back just as strong because that surgery and medical technology has come a long way. I think Fabry could absolutely come back and still be an effective player. It's going to take him a while, I'm sure, to get back because I think he was back in a non-contact jersey today after coming out of it a few practices ago. But I genuinely do think that Fabry is going to be fine. Fabry is going to be second line center when he comes back. I don't agree with that, Jesse. They've played him at center before, and he just doesn't seem like that's his fit in the NHL. I think that, especially with the plethora of centers they have competing for roles right now, I don't think he'd be center. I think Michael Rasmussen's actually done a pretty good job in the interim at 2C, now 1C with Larkin out, but 2C in interim at that role. And I could see that being his future. I think Veleno has a future as a middle 6 center, second line ceiling. He's very tooly. He's very fast. He's got good vision, not great finisher, but you don't need to be, a goal scorer to be a good center. Fabry, I think he's settled in in a role as a winger in the NHL, but that's going to do it, guys. I think I've did a full 30 minutes just about. So agreed, Dan. Practice shape and game shape are way different. But yeah, that's going to do it for me, guys. I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for listening to this very off-the-cuff conversation about the Red Wings and where they're at, and Jakub Vrana coming back, and Filip Hronek and Olli Maatta possibly being back tomorrow, and then Larkin soon, hopefully, as well. And I say Jakub Vrana being back, obviously, I mean, he's practicing in a non-contact, so being at practice is a great step in the right direction. We continue to hope for his health. But it's exciting, man. After a dreary episode yesterday and talking about how they just need to keep their heads above water, suddenly it looks like there's some hope at the end of the tunnel. So Scotty and I, I'm sure, are going to continue this conversation on Sunday, as I haven't gotten his opinion on it yet. And then we're going to break down the game against the Ottawa Senators, hoping they break that losing streak, as there's a little bit of a healthy rivalry between us and the Locked On Sens guys. And then, yeah, game preview for the game that happens on Monday. So, as we would say, same time, same place. It's your team, BetOnline, every day.